This evening, I would like to say a few things about very distinctive luxury ceramics from the so-called Islamic Golden Age of the 9th or 10th centuries AD. These ceramics go by the name of Nishapur. Nishapur is a city in northeastern Iran, and as the name suggests, it was almost certainly founded by the Sasanian monarch Shapur I in the 3rd century AD. Nish may refer to the color blue, which suggests the turquoise mines near the city. The city has been an important producer of turquoise for at least 2 millennia. Of course, now Iran, being linked to an ever wider international network, is even able to source American turquoise, although they do indeed continue to make very distinctive turquoise jewelry at the site using much American turquoise. Nishapur was a very important capital city at the time of the Seljuk Empire, or at least a part of the Seljuk Empire, in 1037. Before that time, it had rather shrunk in size and declined into relative obscurity after the early Islamic centuries. However, the Seljuks reignited the Silk Route between East and West so that the travel between China and Anatolia and Europe was going strong, meaning silk and other luxury goods such as lacquers would be coming from China, whereas usually money in the form of silver and gold would be flowing from Europe into China. All the stops along the way would benefit from this Silk Road, including Nishapur. It became one of the greatest cities in the Middle Ages for both art and for trade. It's associated with the Islamic Golden Age of the 9th and 10th centuries, particularly the Samanid dynasty. This dynasty was closely aligned with the ancient pre-Islamic culture in Iran and drew very heavily upon its artistic canon, meaning that there was no absolute bar to figural representations in art from the 9th and 10th centuries. This comes as a surprise for some people because they assume that Islamic art has a hostility to figural representations. Much of this ceramic from the site of Nishapur was recovered by the Metropolitan Museum, and the finds were split with Tehran and Mashhad in Iran, dating from the years 1935 to 1940, and then with a final season in 1947 to 48. Sadly for archaeology, although most of the ceramic has been published, the architecture and other small finds remain unclear. As mentioned previously, it's important to consider the luxury ceramics from this period within its wider context, its geographical context. These animals are clearly derived from lions. You can see the manes here, and you can see they're with their mouths open, rather threatening. This is almost certain from the ancient steppe style or Central Asian style of animals. No doubt, small finds from previous centuries were recovered by people at this time and adapted for their own use. It's also clear that lions are not only associated with Africa, and that lions, for instance, survived in Iraq and Iran until more recent centuries. The body of this ceramic is a pinkish color. The glaze very clearly is a white. It's a high technology ceramic in that it's not simply a clear glaze, but it's a colored glaze that blocks the color of the body. so that it's not a pinkish background, it's a whitish background. And the decoration is in what you could say a copper color or a gold color. Clearly the vessels imitate metal vessels that would have been luxury vessels of the age. Here's another example of a Nishapur bowl. And as can be seen here, the figure has a crown. It's almost certain that kings were not indicated as being kings using a crown as a regalia. That is a Western phenomena. However, by this time, almost certainly many coins from the West would have passed through Nishapur, and this would have been regarded as a universal symbol. One other important element is the figure looks like he is seated cross-legged. It's clear from other arts of this period that kings did not occupy high thrones, but were instead on high platforms, and they would have been seated cross-legged. It's also significant to note that there are tiny droplets of blue here, and this glaze is a kind of green. This almost certainly would imitate turquoise, which can range from blue to green. There is no reason to assume that turquoise is only in blue as it is regarded today. Turquoise, blue. Much natural turquoise ranges in color. Again, this vessel almost certainly would take as a model metal vessels that would have been adorned with stones to increase their value. However, over time, ceramic vessels take on a life of their own. This vessel almost certainly would have not been for everyday use, but would have been for luxury use, infrequent use. Ceramic is relatively difficult to transport, so these vessels from the 9th and 10th century AD did not spread widely themselves, although all it would take is one of these vessels to start a local industry in similar vessels. Therefore, when the term Nishapur ceramic or Nishapur bowl is being used, it's not exactly certain that it is from the city of Nishapur. There can be a variety of other areas that could have produced similar bowls. However, because the raw materials for these bowls were very particular to the region, it's likely that they were produced in a relatively narrow area, but not in the city itself. There is an absolute cutoff date for the manufacture of these luxury ceramics, and this is known from historical sources. In 1221, the husband of one of Genghis Khan's daughters was killed. It was decided to slaughter all the inhabitants of Nishapur. The result was that the city was completely destroyed and the inhabitants were slaughtered. Representations later, drawing upon literary references, suggest that the skulls were piled as high as the hills, literally. Archaeological evidence bears this out in that the city was completely destroyed and it was invaded several times and earthquakes destroyed the rest. It didn't emerge as an important center until much after the Mongols in 1221. Sadly, for much of early Islamic culture, the Mongols did incredible damage, so we'll never know how much further the Islamic potters could have pushed their craft. It is important to realize, however, that during the golden age of Iran and the golden age of Islam, at this time, it was a very tenuous thing. Civilization could be destroyed by the destruction of a few major cities. Luxury wares like this didn't really survive, sadly. Thank you very much.